You may be seated. So here is a very old story about a king. But this king is not a monarch. King, K-H-I-N-G, is the name of a Chinese woodcarver in a story by Xuanzi about 300 years before Jesus would disrupt our thoughts about that other kind of kings. The Trappist monk Thomas Merton tells the story like this. King, the master carver, made a bell stand made of precious wood. When it was finished, all who saw it were astounded. They said it must have been the work of spirits. The Prince of Lu said to the master carver, "What is your secret?" And King replied, "I'm only a workman. I have no secret. There is only this. When I began to think about the work you commanded, I guarded my spirit, did not expend it on trifles that were not to the point. I fasted in order to set my heart at rest. After 3 days fasting, I'd forgotten gain and success. After 5 days, I had forgotten praise or criticism. After 7 days, I had forgotten my body with all its limbs. By this time, all thought of your highness and of the court had faded away. All that might distract me from the work had vanished. I was collected in the single thought of the bell stand. And then I went to the forest to see the trees in their own natural state. When the right tree appeared before my eyes, the bell stand also appeared in it, clearly, beyond doubt. All I had to do was put forth my hand and begin. If I had not met this particular tree, there would have been no bell stand at all. What happened? My own collected thought encountered the hidden potential in the wood. From this live encounter came the work which you ascribe to the spirits." Now, we could spend a lot longer unpacking this story than any of you want to sit in those Calvary pews cut from the severest trees in the forests, I'm told. But let's spend a little more time with it before we consider Jesus' exchange with Pilate. The story begins with everyone wondering how such a beautiful bell stand could even exist out in the world. The Prince of Lu, the ruler of that world, assumes the woodcarver must have a secret, but King says there's no secret. King, the woodcarver's only method was to forget. First, to forget about gain and success. He fasted until he didn't care if he got the bell stand made or whether he gained anything from doing so. And since a prince commanded that the stand be constructed, remember, an unsuccessful attempt might well have cost him his life. Even so, after 3 days of fasting, King forgot to care about succeeding or what he might gain or lose. It took 2 more days without food to forget about praise and criticism, to stop worrying about what people thought of who he was or what he produced or where a woodcarver might actually fall in their rankings of what's important in their world. But after 5 days of fasting, he'd managed to forget what other people thought of him. By the end of a full week without food, King the carver had forgotten his body and all its limbs, we're told. This forgetting sounds strange, maybe only to someone who's never lost herself completely in a task. Losing consciousness of one's body can sometimes mean your body is finally absorbed fully in its work. And the last thing King had to forget was the prince himself and his court. King the woodcarver had to let thoughts of kings on thrones fade away to go off into the forest and find the tree with the bell stand waiting within it. Not the tree he could use his powers and his skill to turn into some beautiful object. The master carver insists that his art is a matter of discovery. It's a matter of shedding everything that distracts him, even princes who order bell stands to be made, from seeing the truth of something real out there in the world, and then setting himself to the task of bringing it forth. I guess the 7-day fast just drives home how hard it is to forget about success and praise and bodies and finally kingdoms in order to see what is actually true. It drives home that all these distractions, to me at least, are still what keep us from seeing the world for what it is. They are still what keep us from seeing the truth, aren't they? 23 centuries later, 8,000 miles away. Now, it's an accident of language that the Chinese woodcarver's name sounds just like an English word for monarch. But this is helpful for thick-headed types like me who need their metaphors writ large in all capitals, preferably in a black crayon. I might have missed the possible connections with Jesus otherwise. The king in the story, you see, is not the prince. King is a word that has nothing to do with princes and thrones. It's a woodcarver's name that sounds like a word we know, but isn't that at all. You say that I'm a king, Jesus says to Pilate. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. In other words, maybe, use whatever word for me you want, but my loyalty is only to what is true. It's not that it takes a different kind of ruler to get us closer to the truth. It's that kings and truth are terms from entirely different realms, it seems. So different that we may have to choose which one to give ourselves over to. When we talk about Christ as a king, we usually imagine him taking the place of other worldly rulers, don't we? We've been taught to do so by centuries of Christian thinking and Christian art. How many stained glass windows and paintings and statues exist of Jesus seated on a throne in a crown with a scepter in his hand? How many of us Christians have thought, literally or metaphorically, won't it be great when Jesus is finally the king? When Jesus rules the world like a world ought to be ruled, then he'll set things right. But the striking thing about Jesus' perspective on kings in the Gospels is not that he thinks he can make a better one. It's that he just doesn't care about them. Really. He just doesn't care. Because kings, simply put, are not in charge of truth. They're not what's most real. Kings, worldly rulers in all their forms and realms, they depend on our drive for gain and success, don't they? Look around. Kings are the ones who best cultivate our praise and deflect our criticism. Read the papers. Most of all, they are those who insist that all thought about the prince and of the court must never, ever fade away from our minds. They insist on their importance, on their so-called truth. Kings are made of the most fickle and fleeting stuff, not what's eternal. Which means that on this Sunday, a day when we hear about Jesus and Pilate and kings, this Sunday is actually a day when Jesus tells us to stop caring about kings and begin caring about what's true. Fast 7 days if you're a woodcarver. Fast 40 days if you're a Jesus. Fast until the temptations of all this worldly power passes by. Fast until you forget. Only then will you see the world for what it is, I think. Only then will we be able to use the one life we've been given to expose something beautiful and true. If I had not met this particular tree, there would have been no bell stand at all, said the woodcarver. For this I was born, to testify to the truth, said the Christ. This is nothing how the kings and presidents and CEOs and tastemakers, and maybe we bring it closer to home, this is nothing like how the priests I know of speak very often, this one very much included. And so maybe we should ask, what kind of fast do you need for all the untruth that clamors for your attention to lose its claim on your mind? What kind of fast would it take for you to forget everything that distracts you from what is actually true in yourself and in the world around you? What channel, what website, what newspaper, what device, what toxic relationship, whose opinion of you, what job, what authority? What? What is it you need to let go of to see the truth of your life as Jesus sees it? These are demanding questions, and they can make these old stories sound like bad news at first blush. The stories can seem to demand this clarity and strength that only a few saints and saviors over the century can ever achieve. And to be clear, being faithful to them may mean finding oneself before a Pilate one day, incapable of playing his untruthful games. The stories can seem only like burdens until they break open just how tired and lost our souls can become, trying to live up to the made-up standards of all our kings. It's for your sakes, not his, that Jesus says, stop caring so much about pilots and presidents. Stop giving over so much of your minds to gain and success, to praise and to criticism, even to your body with all its limbs and imperfections. If you can fast from all this caring, not perfectly, but even a little, there is beauty and truth in this world waiting patiently to be discovered by you. It's what he told us so many times in so many ways, right? Fast from whatever needs letting go. Your pride, your anger, your resentments, your guilt, your ego, your worry about tomorrow. Let go of these, Jesus says, not to become a better person, but because a kingdom of God, if that's what you want to call it, is at hand. It's here. Let all that would distract you from the truth of what God's made vanish. See clearly. And then put forth your hand, and begin your true work in the world. Amen.